So I recently read a book called Stolen Focus by the author and journalist Johann Hari that argues why our ability to pay attention has reduced over the years. But most importantly, why it's not our fault. Because it has been in a way stolen from us and we are not even aware of it. So if you're someone like me who has been constantly wondering why you cannot read a book for more than 2 minutes at a stretch, or why you are not able to focus on a topic for long, or why you can't have that meaningful conversation with someone because your attention keeps drifting away every 10 seconds, well, you're not the only one. It's indeed a ubiquitous problem. And so what do? We blame ourselves, we blame others, we blame the content or that thing that we are desperately trying to engage in, and yet we fail over and over again. But most importantly, we do not understand why it's happening. What's that core reason for a severe decline in our attention span? This book, through various research-backed data, tries to address most of these issues through 12 deep factors that are harming our focus. I will talk about a few that I think are super important, and my hope is that once you understand them, it will in some ways help you reclaim your focus. So, the first reason why you are not able to focus is the great speed at which we do things in today's day and age. And you might be thinking, well, of course, we have all sorts of technology around us, we can do most of the things pretty quickly, and that's what technology is meant for. And while that's true, what's remarkable is that even things like the speed at which we do our daily routine tasks have been impacted in the recent years. To give you an example, people nowadays talk significantly faster than they did in 1950s. They have also started to walk 10% faster in cities in just last 20 years. And there's a solid reason for that. There's always too much to do, too much to talk about, too much to absorb, too much to care about. In other words, we are living through the era of the great acceleration. We want a lot of things and we get them at a much faster speed than we can actually process them. And various researchers point out that as we speed up the process of grabbing information, we slow down our ability to comprehend them. That's why it's recommended that we slow down once in a while and engage in tasks that require us to pay attention. So practices like yoga or meditation or Tai Chi that require us to be fully present are some of the great ways to improve our attention, because we need to shrink the world to fit our cognitive bandwidth. Another related reason to this is the myth of multitasking. And this is something that I think most of us can relate to, because we all do it. I do it too. Every morning I have at least a dozen browsers and apps open on my computer, and I'm also texting someone while making coffee, while listening to some kind of podcast or news in the background. Sometimes it's by choice, but a lot of times it's just how we are evolving as human beings. We feel like if we don't do enough, we'll be left behind. So we are constantly juggling various tasks at once, and that might give us a sense of being more productive. But what we are actually doing is reconfiguring our brain moment to moment, which degrades our ability to focus in 3 different ways. The first is called the switch cost effect. Let's say you're working on an important project and you get an email in between that you decide to read because you think you must multitask to stay productive. And if that email is not contributing to your present work, then the truth is that you lost that time reading that email and then that extra time where your brain needed to readjust itself. So overall, it wasn't really that productive. Not only that, the science also shows that when you try to multitask and come back to your actual project, you automatically become more prone to making errors. This is what the scientists call the screw-up effect. And the third effect, which I think is super important, and the one you may notice in medium or long term, is something called the creativity. This is where your brain can no longer find associative links because it's too busy processing information, then trying to correct the errors and reconfiguring itself to accomplish various tasks. So how to resolve this? The way to overcome this kind of multitasking is monotasking. And as the name suggests, it's a practice where you focus on a single task for as long as you can. And that can depend from person to person, depending on how low or high the attention span is. The idea is that you expand the duration of your focus. So for example, let's say you're working on a task, try and focus on that task for 10 minutes. Do not check your emails, do not reply to any texts, and block out all the other distractions. But for those crucial 10 minutes, do not let any distractions come your way. And the idea is the more you do it, the longer that focus time gets, from 10 minutes to 20 minutes to 30 minutes and so on. The second reason why your attention span is reducing is because we are never in a flow state. Now, flow state, if you don't know, is a mental state where the person performing the activity is fully immersed in the act. It's what we also call as being in the zone. So one of the top reasons why we are not able to attain a flow state, and this goes to the previous point I made in this video, is because we are rarely monotasking. Because achieving flow state requires us to focus on three major things. Number one, doing one task at a time that we can give our 100% attention to. Number two, selecting a task that is meaningful to us and not something that we are being forced to do. And three, a task that is not too easy that we can accomplish it easily and not too difficult that we cannot achieve it at all. It has to be somewhere in the realm of our capabilities. And the third reason that's impacting our focus, and which shouldn't come as a surprise to any of us, is the lack of sleep. The National Sleep Foundation, which I had no idea was a thing, says that the amount of sleep that we get each day has dropped by 20% in last 100 years. In the US, 40% of the population is now chronically sleep deprived, meaning that they get less than 7 hours of sleep in a day. In the UK, 23% population gets less than 5 hours of sleep a day, and only 15% of us wake up feeling refreshed, which makes so much sense because we are always so exhausted by information overload and multitasking that we barely get any time to sleep. And even when we do get to sleep, we wake up worried and anxious with our phones glued to our faces. So, since 1942, our average sleep time has reduced by an hour. So in essence, what the lack of sleep does is that it shifts your body into sympathetic nervous system zone and treats your lack of sleep as an emergency. It raises your blood pressure, makes you crave fast food and sugar, and that in turn causes your attention to decline. And that's why we need, 3 cups of coffee and a Red Bull to keep us awake before we have to meet a deadline. And what caffeine essentially does is that it doesn't give us extra energy, but instead blocks out certain receptors in our body that detect the level of adenosine, which is a chemical responsible for indicating us that we are sleepy. So in that moment, we do not feel sleepy, but because we are still compromising on our sleep, we are doubly exhausted afterwards. So I guess sleeping less and working more isn't really helping us, and it's not letting us achieve more. And if it is, then it's only for a short term, because chronic sleep deprivation severely affects our attention and therefore our creativity, and in the long term, our biology. The fourth reason, which I think is often talked about and is perhaps one of the most obvious reasons why our attention span is collapsing, is the rise of social media and the way it's designed. I mean, there are tons of articles and documentaries on this. The most famous one is, of course, The Social Dilemma on Netflix, which is a fantastic storytelling of how various algorithms control our lives. So if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. But back to the point, social media has pushed us away from basic tasks that require a lot of our attention. As a result, we don't want to read longer forms of text. We would rather read a headline or a tweet than go and read the actual article. And better yet, if the article was a video, we'd prefer that. And it would be awesome if the video was actually a clip. That's where everything is headed anyway. Endless scroll of small clips on social media, whether it's TikTok or Insta or YouTube Shorts. All of this trend indicates how our attention span is getting shorter and shorter. Now, this book talks about various ways in which social media impacts our attention. For example, it makes us crave rewards. So each like, heart, or retweet induces dopamine rewards in our systems, and after a point we get addicted to it and crave more of it. And this is the most fundamental hack of our brains. It causes us to switch tasks more frequently, whether we are picking our phones up to see the messages or to reply to someone's post. We are impacting our ability to stay focused on one task, which, as I mentioned earlier, impacts our flow state. Social media also now is personalized to our choices. So in a lot of ways, it is way more advanced than you think it is. The algorithm knows what will get you excited, happy, or angry, and it feeds you the content in a certain way to retain your engagement. And the research shows that showing negative or outrageous videos will get us to stare at something for longer periods of time and get us more addicted to it than something that makes us happy and calm. So it's not that social media companies cannot make it less addicting, stop the infinite scroll, or batch their notifications such that you aren't constantly bothered, or show you calming content that doesn't require your attention for long. It's just that it doesn't justify their business models. They want more people to watch more content personalized to their choices. That's where the money comes from. But one way that might change in the future is if they did not depend on ads and move to a subscription business. However, until that happens, or until a better model comes out, we need to be aware of the ways in which they steal our focus and learn to navigate those challenges. For instance, switching on focus mode on your devices until you really want to see a certain notification is a highly useful tip. So most of our food that we eat these days are processed in a way that it gives us huge energy spikes and crashes. We get brain fog 20-30 minutes after we have eaten something processed. I'm not a doctor, but this explains why all of a sudden during the day you may feel lethargic, unattentive, and even unmotivated. There's an important study highlighted in the book that talks about a research group where 70% of the participants, mostly kids, who cut out preservatives and dyes in their food were able to improve their attention by 50%. Because think about it, the attention actually comes from a healthy brain. And a healthy brain needs key nutrients such as omega-3, which helps blood regulation in the brain. And various studies shows that higher blood flow to certain parts of the brain is associated with better performance for various cognitive tasks. The sixth and the last reason why we are not able to focus better is pollution. Our brains have not evolved to deal with various pollutants that we inhale through our respiratory system. So when we inhale certain chemicals on a daily basis, the brain cannot make use of it. So in short term, it creates brain fog and makes us unable to focus for long. But in the long term, it damages our nerves and makes us more prone to diseases like dementia. In one of the studies, it was highlighted that people who lived closer to a major road where there was a high pollution were 15% more prone to develop dementia than people who did not. Now, if you live in a polluted city, there isn't much you can do to overcome this challenge. However, it's good to be aware of these issues so you can try and avoid them as much as you can. So those are the 6 reasons why you're not able to focus. I know some of the tips here sound very obvious, like you should eat whole foods, you should try to be more present through exercise, and that you should use social media mindfully. Yet the problem is that we don't really follow these advices. We have heard them so many times from so many sources that it sounds all banal. And the reason why I think that is because we don't try to understand the depth of the impact. So that leads us not to act upon it. And so if any of these points triggered your interest, I would recommend you to go and check out all the adjacent research and literature around it. There are tons of helpful content out there that you can benefit from, and this book would be a great start. So that's all for today's video. I'll see you next time.